This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. I can't believe I'm doing this again. If you've been on my channel before, you know I enjoy Gaspar Noé films more than anyone really should. And even if you don't know much about Gaspar Noé, chances are you've at least heard about his 2018 film, Climax. While Climax is one of his more accessible films to date, it's still an incredibly tough film to swallow when compared to other commercial films. And despite many fans dismissing it as a watered-down version of his other works, Climax is actually one of the best Noé films to date when it comes to its use of sound. If you've seen my videos on his other films, you know that my fascination for his works chiefly stems from their expert depiction of psychological trauma. Climax, which tells a story of a group of dancers who unknowingly take acid-spiked sangria and descend into madness, is no different. It's a film that focuses on creative visualization, an experience centered around the horror of uncertainty and psychological disarray. And therefore, it is vital that you suspend your disbelief on certain narrative details, including the film's portrayal of LSD, in order to fully appreciate the real trip it has in store for you. For instance, this is my favorite scene from Climax, the moment everyone starts to feel the come-up. Now, pay attention to the music that is playing in the background. This diegetic piece is actually a part of the film's original soundtrack, composed by Thomas Bangalter of Death Punk called Sangria, and it perfectly captures the confusion of the situation by using dissonant notes and rising synth pad that loops in the background while a loud screeching noise slowly dominates the foreground in place of recognizable melodies. Without anyone, except maybe the culprit who spiked the drink, aware of their situation, it is the music that conveys the rising tension of the room and the character's mutating mental state.
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Ça va pas?
This is a brilliant way to infect the audience with the anxiety the characters are feeling, as Climax never shows exactly how each dancer is perceiving their world. But we're getting too ahead of ourselves, so let's back off a bit. The best way to decipher any Noé film is to focus on the structure. Like his other films, Climax begins with a reverse rolling credits that forecast how the film will end and ends with the title, prohibiting the audience from dwelling on and recovering from the film. Sandwiched in between the two are 5 distinct segments divided by different on-screen texts: the interview, the dance, the talk, the chaos, and the aftermath. However, the first and the last segments function more as a wrapping paper than actual content, lasting for only about 5 minutes each. This leaves the film with 3 major acts and 4 text overlays. The first act opens with a text that reads, "French film and proud of it," roaming over a series of curtains that mimic the French flag. Some people may take this shot as being politically charged, but I think it's more fitting to approach it with a cinematic perspective, especially since the flag was a spontaneous decision that came only after the crews received the curtains in those specific colors. Furthermore, it becomes progressively more evident that the displayed rapport between the characters in this scene exists only through the meticulously choreographed dance, and therefore is not reflective of their natural chemistry. This is why the dance is followed by a 7-minute character interaction, and why the 2 events are shot in a fluid single take. In essence, the sweeping sense of well-being created by the gentle camera work is but a pretense and a preface to the impending calamity. This is also the reason why the second act abruptly shifts in tone by capturing the characters in pairs, using a static shot. The separation forces the characters to unveil their true faces, and the previously formed unanimity gradually disintegrates as more characters speak their minds. At the pinnacle of this interaction comes another harmonious dance sequence, to which the audience now can't help but question its sincerity. It's only at this point, 46 minutes into the film, that the film's opening credits start to roll, announcing the end of the performance, the act, and the beginning of unfiltered reality. Because Climax relies on the impact of a sudden tonal shift rather than a gradual development, it is important that you view the film's various techniques through a comparative lens. Take camera work as an example. Anyone can spot the use of Dutch angles and the upside-down shots in the film's finale, but almost nobody questions how the movements have evolved over time to reach this extremity.
Je m'inquiète pour l'enfant.
Let's go back to my favorite scene, the opening of the third act. Again, on its own, there's not much that attracts your attention. But what would happen if you found an analogous scene from the first act and played both clips side by side? Now, you see how things have changed. In the first act, the peripheral space is filled with characters. Their actions are loud, agile, and sharp, reflecting their sobriety. Meanwhile, the third act has the characters dispersed in the main hall, with their movements being notably slower, sluggish, and discordant. Also, the camera work switches from liquid steady in the first act to jolted and organic in the third, better reflecting the shoulder-mounted shooting method of the film. This transforms the seemingly identical environment from feeling lighthearted and optimistic to disconcerting and foreboding. The only element that connects the two acts is the immersive long take, which introduces an underlying force of anxiety to both scenes by syncing the audience with the characters and unmasking their facade. This is what implies the performative nature of the first act and amplifies the terror of the third. You feel trapped to the fate of this story, and the feeling of entrapment only worsens the discomfort of being tied to the character's unwanted mental and physical experience. A vicious cycle. The Dutch angles and other exaggerated shots are the culmination of this cyclic repetition, and the audience is left in a place of limbo, somewhere between sober and high, sickened by the unending ride.
Je le protège de vous!
De qui?
Je le protège de vous!
As mentioned, the most intriguing aspect of Climax is the sound, mainly the diegetic scores that exist within the film world. This creates an interesting dynamic when combined with the film's use of long takes, since the volume and the quality of the music changes with the moving camera. When a camera is following a character near the speaker, the music will be loud and imposing. Conversely, when the camera is far away, the sounds will be subtle and distorted. The best use of this technique is shown in the opening of the third act, where the musical emulation of a come-up gets enhanced by the movement of the camera that highlights the natural reverberation of the grand hall. On top of this, there is less audio input from the characters, which helps emphasize the grandness of the setting, while simultaneously creating an illusion of isolation for each character. Hearing less, perceiving more, and feeling smaller. As a matter of fact, every score present in every section of the film tells distinct stories about the characters and the overall direction of the film by undergoing similarly instantaneous audio transformation. One simple way to understand this concept is to focus on the bass drum. The songs in the first act have lighter drum sounds than those in the third act, partially because their natural audio properties are set this way, but also because they are, again, diegetic, and therefore can be altered depending on the environment of the film world. Either way, the balanced mix of the songs in the first act directs your attention to the explosive brightness of the melodies and hides the underlying tension of the constant drum kick. As the characters drink more sangria and the acid starts to take effect, the percussive layer becomes more and more prominent until the thumping of the heavy bass drum completely takes over the area. The only exception to this rule is Thomas Bangalter's Sangria. For this song, the bass drum remains rather soft to give the spotlight to the pulsating synth and the penetrating screeches that beautifully capture the sensation of unwanted rise of panic, where you know something is wrong but are desperately trying to mask the fear. It's when the first victim of this chaos appears with the bang of the door that the music changes to a more bass-heavy piece, marking the beginning of the next chapter. Another reason for the use of heavy drum pieces in the third act is to accommodate the changing scenery. As the characters start moving from one location to another, wandering in panic, the scores of the third act remain audible thanks to their bass drums. If you haven't noticed, the disappearance of the melodic instruments leaves the steady beat to sound very much like a human heartbeat, mirroring the character's nervous state of mind. In short, the beat is telling everyone that walking away will not end their pain. If you list out the songs being used during pivotal moments of the film, you'll see that the BPM of each piece gradually rises from 128 to the peak of 142 with Sangria and descends back down to 129 by the end. Intended or not, the faint shift in BPM from one song to another supplements the ever-present sense of dread by matching the energy of any given scene.
Joyeusement. Le seul truc que j'ai réussi dans ma vie, c'est cette sangria en fait, tu vois.
C'est vrai qu'elle est bonne.
By now, you may have noticed that in spite of the detailed application of cinematic devices, Climax never places you directly in the shoes of the characters. There are no POV shots of the characters and no auditory hallucinations. The camera only insinuates at the disorienting ordeal, and the sounds function as a mere representation of anxiety. Considering Gaspar Noé's tendency to push the boundaries of perspective shots, this may seem like an odd choice. But I think it's a fitting choice for the film's ultimate goal. You see, limiting the role of the audience as a sober spectator actually augments the sense of isolation and disconnection, especially when paired with the discussed techniques that slightly detach the audience from reality. It makes you feel the same horror, that you may have been spiked with acid and will eventually enter the point of no return. It's an inherent terror of the unknown and the uncontrollable. And that's the answer. At the core of every scene in Climax is this concept of negative anticipation. It is you expecting the worst that makes Dom's appearance in this scene apprehensive. From the opening of the film, Climax has unknowingly led you to form certain expectations and preconceptions about the characters. Dom is a fighter, a problem solver, so when she confronts Lou about not drinking the sangria, you automatically wince at the possibility of a violent attack. And when it happens, it probably wasn't half as bad as you imagined, but because you have built so much tension around the prospect of violence, you squirm in your seat regardless. The same goes for the infamous scene with the locked-up kid. You know that he has accidentally taken the sangria and is starting to feel its effects. You also know there is a danger of electric shock and that his mother, who is already high, will likely lose the key to the room. The film plays with your imagination and deductive reasoning to develop the sequence before anything actually happens. Better yet, you never get to see the kid again until the very end, and only hear his scream in the background whenever someone passes by. With this, the abandonment of the kid goes beyond the narrative to an extra diegetic level where the film itself rejects his presence. Such apathetic treatments of dire situations is what makes Climax a terrifying film. When the final reveal is shown and a brand new trip is suggested, you realize there's no end to this nightmare. Narrative or not, problems are problems. But sometimes it's just more fun to go with the flow, unclenching your fist of logic and letting your body feel the come-up, the film. Like I said, Climax is a limbo. You're not as sober as you may think, and therefore you're not there to assess. You're just there to survive. After all, how would you know what is or is not plausible when you don't even know what you took? So, cheers to that. Hello everyone, thank you as always for watching. Climax is a very stylish, flashy film, but if you look at Noé's other works, they all have that Gaspar Noé look and feel to them, which I really enjoy. I think it's great that directors experiment with the tools they have, and I always recommend others to experience such films. And one place where you can watch distinct and daring films is Mubi, the sponsor for today's video. Mubi is an online curated cinema streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe, ranging from works of iconic directors all the way to emerging auteurs. And since every film is handpicked, it's a great way to watch films you already love and also discover new films you haven't seen before. For example, I'm in Canada and I recently got to rewatch director Bigan's Long Day's Journey into Night on Mubi, which has a completely different tone from Climax but has a similar feel when it comes to its pictures, thanks to the brilliant use of long takes and vibrant colors that add surrealistic quality to the film. Wherever you are located, there are plenty of other great films in Mubi's library for you to check out. And right now, you can try Mubi free for 30 days by using my link at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. That's mubi.com/SpikimaMovies for a whole month of great cinema for free. So thank you again, and that's it for me.